have to, Michael, modify their language, but when Republican senators who seem to be under a huge amount of pressure to confirm these nominees actually start going into the process, I've heard that Bobby Kennedy is maybe fine because he has some Democratic support, but when some of these more controversial candidates are being put forward, do you think when we get into the nomination process, we're going to see Republican senators push back a little harder against Donald Trump than we're seeing them push back now?
No, no, we won't. I mean, look, there's going to be the
so he's going. You think he's going to get everybody through?
There may be one sacrificial lamb out of the trifecta, you know, that everyone's talking about. Who do you think it's going to be? I don't know. Probably Tulsi Gabbard, because that's something that strikes a little bit closer to Republicans on the national security, national defense side. The DOD and Hegseth, you've heard some warming as you guys talked about in the last hour to him. Certainly Bobby Kennedy. That's more about, you know, for Trump, his tie now to the Kennedy legacy more than anything else, and so that probably won't get touched, even though I wouldn't let him within a 10-foot pole of a child with an illness. But you know, here we are. The reality for Republicans does kind of boil down to how much moxie are we going to show that we're willing to assert against a president that is putting up wholly incompetent individuals to serve in the capacities for which they're being asked to serve. The advise and consent portion of this, instead of advising the president, could you send us somebody better so that we could consent to that? There will be the typical haranguing and hemming and hawing, but ultimately bending the knee to his choice. They'll pick one, and everyone will pat themselves on the back and pretend that they did the right thing. And meanwhile, you'll have Hegseth probably over at defense. And you know, someone like Kennedy running the nation's health system, and everyone will just turn a blind eye and wait till the chandelier crashes to the floor or a table gets knocked over and people start complaining about what the hell are these folks doing. So that's the reality that I think, you know, everybody wants to play, you know, the typical Washington game in the lead up to the inauguration, that, you know, we're going to look closely at the president's choice. No, you're not. No, you're not. And you know you're not. And these are some wholly difficult and incompetent people that are being asked to serve in these positions. We all know that. We see the thing in front of us. And yet we pretend that it's going to turn out to be something completely different. And yet we know that's not true either.
Yeah, so many of these candidates have deeply questionable qualifications. We should note the lead story on the New York Times app right now is about how Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s top aide, his lawyer, a man named Aaron Siri, has asked the FDA to revoke the approval of the polio vaccine. So that is something that we could perhaps be looking forward to if RFK Jr. was to be confirmed. So, Vaughn, you know, the spotlight, Kennedy has sort of stayed out of the radar for a little bit. That's going to change next week when he heads to the Hill. But you've been covering all of this, these efforts to get these cabinet members confirmed. And the Trump team out of Mar-a-Lago has really changed tactics in the last 10 days or so. They've gone much more on offense. They're being aggressive in, like, really badgering and mobilizing their minions to go after the Republican senators they feel like are deemed insufficiently loyal. Give us your read, give us your reporting on how that's taking place, but also whether or not you think it's effective, because we've heard sort of both. Publicly, some Republican senators are saying, yeah, we're acknowledging the pressure. Lisa Murkowski said so earlier, said so yesterday. But others behind the scenes feel like, hey, this might backfire.
I think this is the difference in power for Donald Trump in 2025 compared to 2017, 2018. A lot of this is implicit power at this point. Donald Trump doesn't have to be the one on Fox going on and saying, I'm going to come primary you, Joni Ernst. He has built over the years a grassroots coalition that has audibly made these threats. There are individuals looking to that primary challenges. Bill Cassidy in Louisiana already has a challenger in 2026. Bill Cassidy voted convict Donald Trump after January 6th attack. And it's one of those, you could expect that challenger to get the endorsement of Donald Trump because Donald Trump has a history going back to 2022 on his revenge tour, going after and effectively ousting most of those Republican House members that voted to impeach him from office. And so for Donald Trump, he has a part of the Republican Party that knows that they'd come to the defense against those that are not loyal to him. And in the case of Joni Ernst, I was talking with somebody who was familiar with the Trump transition's view of her role in all of this. And we don't have reporting that Donald Trump has directly sent a message to her saying, we're going to primary you. But Joni Ernst is well aware that she's no longer going to be the natural replacement to Pete Hegseth if his nomination were to fail. And so effectively, if you stand in the way of these efforts, do not expect that you're going to have a willing partner at the White House when it comes time to press legislation or parts of the budget that you want to see in your term in office.
Michael, Elise here. Just to go back to some of these nominees, you mentioned that you think Tulsi is the most likely to get shot down. She does, though, have a cult following of sorts, and that's kind of what Trump has pulled into by picking RFK Jr., who also has his own following. Do Republican senators take that calculus into their decision when they decide whether or not to vote for her?
I mean, I think some do. Look, this cuts at the heartstring of what this form of the Republican Party and its leadership look at, that they still hold on to this whole sense of our nation's national security, despite the fact that they, sort of warm up to Putin and they want to hand Ukraine to Putin. They kind of parse that out of the equation, and they just look at these other aspects of the national security conversation in which her name comes up in a very difficult way. There are reports on her contacts, on her behavior, on the things that she says that makes a lot of these folks nervous and uncomfortable. And so there's one thing to be sort of forward-facing, kind of patting Putin on the back of the head and saying, yeah, okay, he's kind of a nice guy, and we have a different view of him now than, let's say, Reagan would have had. And it's something else to say on the inside game that our nation's secrets could be in some level of jeopardy with this person sitting there. We don't know the full extent and the depth to which she has these relationships, what information she has shared in the past, et cetera. So that if they pick at that particular scab in the confirmation process, it'll be interesting to hear how she addresses that. There's already been a little bit of her sort of backstepping, some of those, sort of leanings towards Assad, or some of the things that she said about Russia, et cetera. And that's somewhat to be expected. How much the senators buy that to get past their inherent sort of knee-jerk objection, that's going to be the test of the confirmation process for them. The rest of it, Trump will, I think, and he started to do this, sort of give, oh yeah, I'm with this person, I'm, Pete Hegseth, et cetera. Pete's looking stronger. But I don't sense this overwhelming, that's my guy, you better, put him in. Certainly not with Tulsi. So we'll see how the senators react and whether or not they take that advisory consent part a little bit more seriously than I suspect they will.
On the other hand, there is a lot of "that's my guy" with Kash Patel at FBI.
Yes.
And we're seeing that reflected in some of the comments that senators have said overwhelmingly supportive among Republicans yesterday on the Hill. Michael Steele, thank you as always. We, of course, will be